now that we've had our midterm elections, and we pretty much know what the results are. There are some details necessary to be cleaned up, but basically we know what the results are. What does that mean in terms of the next 6 months or a year and a half, in terms of how are things going to work? Are we going to be cooperate more, cooperate less? Are we going to get more done, less done? In what areas? So that's really the initial topic for this evening. I personally think that we're going to, in some respects, have a little bit more cooperation than we had before, simply because people are going to be forced to figure out how they can get somebody else to support them. They're not going to be, I don't think, as strident in terms of their demands. Everything has to be exactly the way I want it. No ifs, ands, or buts, and anybody who doesn't go along with it doesn't count. I think now there's going to, at least the House and the Senate are going to try to accomplish a couple of things in a couple of areas, one of which I personally think will be infrastructure, which we've been promising was going to be a high priority for a couple of years, and it's not even, to my knowledge, been a bill introduced. So I think the Democrats are going to try to push it, if for no other reason that they'll get credit for it. And the Republicans can't, I don't think, really be seen as saying, no, U.S. jobs don't count. So that's at least my initial take.
Well, I think that the citizens, now that we have voted and come to pretty much some conclusion, the citizen is expecting the leadership, our leaders, to help us come together as a country, to stop fighting and swearing and bringing really things against each other, and let's see how we can develop this country, and let's really become and continue to become, as in the past, a leader, not only of this country but the world. I, as a citizen who voted, I absolutely would like to see both the Democrats as well as the Republicans as well as the independents come together and listen to each other and try to develop things that's best for this country. It's just needed, I believe.
I agree with you, but
I agree, and I am not as optimistic as you are. I think that the Republican leadership gets their power from division, and they're not. I don't see them changing. There are more Democratic votes in the country every year than there are Republican votes, and even though the Republicans have been in power, the number of votes for people voting for Democrats versus people voting for Republicans has been greater, and so I think the Republicans are afraid that they will be, if they try to cooperate, they'll be pushed off into the background, because if the Democrats come in and do accomplish things that are good for the people, then they'll get the credit, and the move will be to go more Democratic. And the other thing is that Trump gets his power from division, pitting one group against another.
And since we know that he gets his power from division, why are we allowing that to continue to happen? That's my question.
How do you
He's
stop
the one
it?
that's stopping it. He's the one that's saying it.
How do you stop it? If I say bad, nasty things to you, even if you turn the other cheek, there's people standing behind me or off to the side who are cheering me on.
And that part has got to stop.
But I don't know how you stop it.
I think the problem is that if you watch the rallies, you see him making these outrageous comments, and whether they're outrageous or not, I guess it depends on your point of view. But making these comments, and then see people wildly cheering him on, and and the comments are really, it's the quote ad hominem type of comments, and there are, unfortunately, I'm very surprised. I'm really surprised at how uncaring Americans are about each other. Especially people who claim to be Christian, and yet they're not caring at all about their neighbor. That's the one thing that Christians are supposed to be doing. Love God and love your neighbor. Treat your neighbor as yourself. That's the fundamental rule.
Actually, I was going to comment about that. You brought this up very nicely. To be a Christian, you are supposed to love everybody.
Yes.
And Obama did the most Christian thing anybody could do, made Obamacare.
Yes.
And what the opposition is doing, derailing that step by step.
That's because they don't want to pay for it.
Yes, but isn't that Christian will? Where is that Christian will then? That's what
That's
I would.
anti-Christian.
That's anti-Christian.
Yes.
So that's what I have been thinking about this whole week actually. How is that? How does that play into the fundamental ethos of the country, which fundamentalists actually talk about, is based on Judeo-Christian principle?
Well, what they interpret it as is my immediate neighbor, the person next door.
Okay.
2 doors down, forget about him.
Okay.
So that's the person they consider their neighbor, as opposed to the world in general.
But
and you can go back to the story of the Good Samaritan, where this Samaritan, I think most people have heard of the story, but the Samaritan helps this poor Jewish person who has been beaten up by robbers, and eventually pays for all his bill for the person that's going to take care of him until he comes back on the same road, whereas a couple of other people just passed him right by. And so that was the story that shows you that this is what your responsibility is to your fellow man and your fellow human.
Fellow human.
Yes, let me not say the using the generic term is
But one thing that the voters and citizens have come up with is suddenly they are saying, yes, we need females into leadership. And I enjoyed seeing how this election went in terms of appointing females into leadership positions. That is a start of hearing 2 sides of everything.
Well, I have a slightly different take on it.
Okay.
I think that women are people. I know it's a radical idea, and they should be represented, and they have a different viewpoint, and that's important. But the idea that if only women were in charge, then the world would be a better place, I think is probably...
I didn't say that.
Okay, well, that's what I'm hearing.
No.
Not necessarily from you, but from the rest of the world.
I see.
And my experience with women is they're people like everybody else, and they have their own fights with each other and everybody else. And so we don't solve anything just by putting women in charge as opposed to men. We solve things by putting people whose goals more or less go along with our, or my goals and your goals and Paul's goals, which may not be the same. And as long as we understand that compromise, everybody doesn't get everything they want, but everybody gets something, is the way to go. And even the Republicans in the tax cut bill gave pennies to the common man so that they could give thousands of dollars to the rich. But they understood everybody's got to get something.
Yes.
So
Actually, I agree with you that we need to I realize you didn't say that what Bob was interpreting, but that's what the interpretation is going actually. That because there are women, we should expect them to go one block and just vote for this or the other. But what I would wait for is how do their viewpoints fall into different silos. And that might give us really a pause when we see extreme right and extreme left and extreme right, and then some in the middle. And then how do you reconcile those viewpoints with all the men who are on the other side? And I have yet to see that, because right now they are in kind of in the middle of kind of orientation, and we don't have, although we have some ideas about what the women are saying, but they have not really sat with their own party platform advocates.
Okay.
And then we will probably see what their actual viewpoint is going to be.
Okay, so did you assess when they allowed the Hispanics, they allowed the blacks, and they allowed others to vote? Did you assess what they were, how they would vote and help the country run?
Well, that's a different point in comparison to what the women who are elected would do.
I see.
In general, you see that more women have come out. That's true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then you see the different, for lack of a better term, voting blocks. Vote in certain ways as long as your interest and my interest goes with the interest what the candidate is saying.
I see.
So we vote like that. Or I like the candidate. Doesn't matter whether it's my voting block or not. As long as the candidate hates the guy who I hate, then it's good. I mean, this is unfortunately the way the democracy is going.
well, there's an old Arabic proverb: "The enemy of my enemy is my friend."
Yes.
And it's a whole bunch easier to agree on who we hate than it is to agree on who or what we love. So that's how things have been for a long time. Getting back for a moment to my idea about women being in charge, and that's the answer. Betty DeVos is a woman, and if you look at her policies, etc., I don't think that you necessarily agree with them or would support them. Nancy Pelosi is a woman, and there's a whole block of women in the United States who don't want to have anything to do with her.
And a whole lot of men who don't like her
Well,
either.
yeah, that's neither here nor there. And then the final point being that
What about Maura Healey?
Maura Healey. Oh, she's the one who's supposedly going to run against.
I'm not
No,
sure,
she's the-
but she's the woman who is quite assertive and let people really know what she thinks, including discussing.
she's
treasurer.
treasurer.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
and choosing our
She's a woman.
president.
Why would I know?
You
I was
voted for
thinking
her,
of
okay.
Melania Trump and the woman who I can't pronounce her name, who was John Bolton's assistant, having a cat fight, for lack of a better term, in public.
Was it in public?
Well, the East Wing, the spokesman for Melania Trump,
Oh, I
said this woman's got to be replaced.
And so did Melania Trump say on camera.
Is that
Okay,
no?
well,
She said, I talked to my husband, she's got to go.
okay.
Wow.
Just because women are in positions of power doesn't make the world a better place or necessarily a worse place.
I'd like to know what the issue was. They never did say what the issue was. I've
Well,
seen.
I've heard things saying there was some kind of a fight over who was allowed to be on Melania Trump's plane going to Africa.
Yes.
I don't think they've gotten down to that level of detail.
Well,
Mike,
that's right. I think the national security people wanted more national security people on the plane, and she wanted more, I guess, press.
yeah, or whatever. But ultimately, it comes down to men can be pretty petty and women can be extremely petty.
Excuse me?
You doubt it?
Extremely petty, you
Extremely
said.
petty. I remember at one point I came in to manage a group up in Wang in Tewksbury, and I replaced a woman. She actually got promoted and hired me to replace her, I should say. And they had this thing where the staff could ask the new manager any question they wanted, and he had to answer it. But in return, he could ask a question back. And so the obvious question of this group, mostly women, was, how do you feel about having managing a group of women? My attitude was, no big deal. I mean, everybody does their job and we do fine. And then I asked, how do you feel about having a male manager after having a female manager? And for about 5 minutes, these women were talking about how much they hated this former manager. And then suddenly the light clicked on, they realized what they were saying, and sudden silence.
Well, probably probably it was nothing against that woman. It was just you provided a platform.
Yeah.
Well, that's
to-
the
to
purpose.
vent, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they probably did have something
Yeah.
against that woman
Yeah.
specifically. Because there are good managers
Yeah,
and
there are
bad
bad
managers all over.
Yeah, and it may have nothing to do.
I'm sure we've all
yes,
seen them.
yes, and it had probably nothing to do with being a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
I really didn't learn a great deal about how things worked at that point, because I had my own style, and people seemed to like it, so that was the end of things. But again, women in groups, I think men, because they're taught to sports to be on a team, actually tend to cooperate more than women who the ideal is they have their own place.
No,
And they run.
I
That-
disagree.
I think-
But it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Women tend to discuss a subject collectively,
Yes.
whereas when you have a group of men, the leader will say what they're going to do.
I think I
And
think
Accept that.
Yeah.
That's I think
yes, that's true actually.
But
in general, that happens that way.
I think that, well, it depends on the thing, and we're getting far afield.
Yeah, I mean,
apologize.
not every case, but,
Yeah.
but in general, that's
Yeah.
that's the way things happen.
More collaboration, discussions.
Maybe discussions, but in terms of, well,
So people will agree with each other when they are comfortable with each other. And I have understood that some women walk into this room and there are just men leaders. So they feel out of place and they feel that they are not truly represented. And I can understand that truly, because when I walk into a place and I am the only representative of a black person, I am uncomfortable for a while until I can see whether the people are open for discussion and is ready to see me as a person as opposed to see me as something else. And so I think that as women and men, as a group, we have to make sure that we're respecting each other and know how to work for the same thing, working for our country.
Yeah, but what essentially happens in general as part of human behavior is that we have built up images about people. So we have stereotypes. And so what you are really talking about is the implicit bias, which we have to really push it away. But that's not easy. But people should try that. That implicit bias, which we are not even aware of, and we try to educate people about that. But it's a long road, and it's not easy. But I think more and more people, once they are educated, realize how implicit that bias also is damaging, in addition to the explicit bias. And what most of the people have is implicit bias, but there are people who explicitly are against one group or for another group. So that's becomes more damaging in that openly.
Yeah, and it's really bad when you have a leader who encourages that.
Yes.
I mean, that is that
Yes.
is the worst thing that is happening. That you have a person saying, I like the rep who body slams the reporter. I mean, how can you top that?
Impeach.
But it's not an impeachable offense.
No, but he's done enough to be impeached. But that's not
Okay.
a subject for this.
Well, that's actually one of the things
Actually-
that might
What is the
come
subject?
up in the next 2 years, so it probably is a subject.
I was reading a book. It's has nothing to do with politics or anything like that. But it was he quoted in the book Edmund Burke in 1795. I always thought it was Elie Wiesel, but in order for evil to triumph, it only requires good men to do nothing.
Yeah, I think the more recent one was Churchill. I think was quoted on that as well, but Burke
Yeah,
is the
he's
first
original
one that I'm aware of.
And then what we see is, in the past 2 years, the Republicans in the Senate and the House enabled this guy, and they didn't try to talk him out of doing things, because in a lot of cases he was doing the things they wanted him to do. Especially the tax cut for the rich. That's their number one issue.
I disagree. Judges are the number one issue.
Well, yeah, judges are the number one issue, but they would have got the judges no matter what.
But
Because in the Senate, even if they talked him into resigning, it would have been Pence, and the judges would be the same. So it's not that. It's the they were doing what they wanted to have done, and they wanted the big tax cut, and the heck with the deficit, and the heck with the national debt, and we're seeing that now.
Oh no, we're very concerned about the national debt. We can't afford Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security anymore. Basically what they're trying to do, or were trying to do, is go back to 1920. Not only 1920 in terms of social programs, but the 1920s in terms of immigration. When the immigration bill that was passed, the specific reason, defined reason was to maintain the country the way it was now. They didn't want all these Eastern Europeans and Italians and other people who were going to change the nature of the country from coming in.
So that means you mean that act was after the Chinese Exclusion Act? Or?
Chinese exclusion, I think, was the 1860s or 1870s.
So this 1920.
It was mid-1920s, and I don't remember the name of the act, but it was very specific. If they did a census and let's say 10% of the country was from Germany,
Yes.
then of the people allowed in, 10%.
Yeah,
had
this
come
was
from
this was the countrywide quota bill.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now I recognize
Yeah.
it. It's countrywide quota bill.
And it was explained that way. I don't know if it's actually in the act, but it was definitely explained that way. This is what we're trying to do, keep the country looking the way it is now. And it obviously failed miserably.
Well, that was actually, according to some sources, the biggest damage to the country was done in the 1960s when the countrywide quota was erased, so that immigration was opened up for everybody.
Okay,
And
I
how
remember
did- how
that, but I thought it was still somewhat.
Yes, but in 1960s, it was opened up for everybody, so that essentially you had the influx of people not only from Europe but also from Asia and other places, the other undesirable areas. And look where we are.
Asshole
And-
country.
and-
Yes, that's exactly what the guy said.
But opening it up to other people coming in, did that make us a worse country?
No, according to some sources, this is what is biting people, that so-called we don't want such other folks to be here, because this country is, as you said, it was supposed to be so-called pure as deemed by those folks, and we are diluting this by bringing in some kind of additional color into the domain.
Well, this country was built on immigrants.
Yes, but that's a valid argument on in academic circles.
But also, we closed the door. I got in, nobody else.
Yes.
And somebody snuck in underneath the transom. Okay, but nobody else. And we don't want any of that foreign stuff. We want to have pasta and pizza and egg rolls and good American
Yes.
food.
So we're sending our military to the border now
Right.
to
To keep a couple of hundred who may have gotten there to the border from coming in and doing what is legal, which is in the
Yeah,
American law, because we ratified international treaties which make it part of the Constitution, that people can be asked for asylum. They don't have to give it,
yes,
but
yes,
they can ask. It's legal, and the way it's being treated right now is it's criminal.
yes, yes.
You know, what was it, Dickens? Can I have some more? And everybody freaked out because you're not supposed to do that. Well, it's the same kind of thing. He has the right to ask for more. You don't have to give it to him, but he has the right.
But that's what actually the other interpretation to that is that we are being subjected to United Nations international control by accepting those kind of treaties, and we can't accept that. We need to have our own laws, so that those are nationalist rather than
Right.
globalist. So
And
that's
it,
a
it
whole
was the
debate there.
Irish who voted to make us take asylum.
Yeah.
It was the Irish Parliament who said that. The Americans had nothing to do with it. The Congress did not vote on that. It's written down somewhere, but it's not real.
It was before the Congress.
We decided. We as Americans decided, and now people are saying no, that was wrong. Which, by the way, is part of democracy.
Yeah.
You can change your mind, but you can't say it's illegal, immoral, and fattening. It is what it is, and if you don't like it, then change it. The best way would be to provide some decent arguments as to why people should have wanted it changed, as
But-
opposed to just creating chaos.
But at the same time, you have the opinion that president can make an executive order and change everything, so that. But that has kind of become silent now. The immigrant caravan has stopped being talked about. Birthright citizenship has been stopped being talked about recently after the election. So maybe it was just election rhetoric, or maybe it will come up again after couple of years.
Well,
Hey, transgender was
Trans-
just,
yes.
was something that just came out of the blue, and then suddenly it became real.
Yes.
if you think about it, you know, how far away was this quote caravan,
Mm-hmm.
and all these American servicemen are not going to be home for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Maybe not home for Christmas.
No, because they are supposed to be duty bound there.
And they're not going to do anything because they're not allowed to use weapons.
Mhm.
The U.S. military is not allowed to use weapons in the United States.
They're allowed to shoot across the border at these hordes of children.
Is that legal? Not that. That can't be legal.
If Mexico and the United States went to war and Mexico attacked, it would be legal to shoot across the border.
And
We have declared war against
A
this,
few people that are trying.
yeah, the couple of hundred people who are going to come in and overwhelm us.
Well, you know, I mean, to be fair, it is what, how many thousands, right?
I don't think they're all there. I don't think they all came.
Let's just
Originally, it was about 1,000 or 2,000.
no. Let's just say it was
7,000.
it was. Let me call it 72,000.
Oh wow, that's a lot of people.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's with 3,600 counties in the United States. That's 2 people per county.
Is it
That's three
3,600
too
counties?
many.
36. Are there 3,600 counties?
3,600 counties
Wow, I
in the
gotta
United
remember it
States,
now.
and that averages to 2
People.
per county. And there's a
Wow.
lot of counties that will probably get more than 2, and a whole bunch of counties that will get 0.
So isn't it then in the good faith argument would be that probably some areas would get
Actually, I'm
free
sorry.
labor. Some areas would get free. I mean, free means labor force which they need.
My math is wrong. It's 7 million, not 7.
No, there's not 7 million counties.
No. But there's 7.2 million people, according to Bush, according to Trump.
that want to
No.
come in here.
In that
In that caravan?
In that caravan.
Is that what?
It's rather amazing.
Is that right?
That's
Yeah,
a
I
lot
think
of
there's
people.
7.2 million in Honduras to start with.
And
Well,
Is that what? I didn't get that number.
Yeah,
Wow,
That's what I.
that's amazing.
That's
Wow.
what he's saying.
uh,
And you know, God only knows how many Islamists are in.
Yes,
Right.
maybe.
You know,
yeah, maybe 50% of them.
Al Qaeda.
I do
Yes.
remember at one point he said, go down and go to the caravan and you'll see. And there were journalists embedded in the caravan at that moment who said, I haven't seen anybody. They're all basically from Central America. And this was back when there was 1,000 or 2.
Wow.
So, but when we accept the fact that somebody can flat out lie for their own purposes, and the people that he's trying to impress will quote him when it's appropriate, and the rest of the time they ignore him, but they prevent us from accomplishing anything positive, then we deserve what we get.
Well, the problem is not just the United States, because this right-wing movement is happening all over the world right now.
yes, yeah.
Brazil, Germany is getting
Right.
is losing Angela Merkel. Brexit. there's a whole-
Macron.
But they are following the Americas.
No,
and-
No,
they have
no.
their own. They were
Yeah.
pretty powerful before America.
I mean, they are
Sorry, go on.
powerful, but I had not heard of them not taking in people who were coming.
It's not so much whether they accept immigrants or not. It's the right wing part of the quote nationalist philosophy is taking over a whole bunch of countries. There's a lot of strongman dictators
Yeah,
coming to power.
Eastern
Coming to
Europe,
power.
Putin, the guy in Ukraine. where perfect examples, the guy in Poland,
Philippines, you have the guy.
Philippines.
So he says shoot everybody
Yeah.
who he doesn't like.
Iran,
Iran, of course.
Saudi Arabia.
Actually, Iran went from a strong man to sort of a more moderate, and
Except the strongman is now the head Ayatollah.
well, yeah, but I
he's
mean,
always
the
been.
administrator. They went from Ahmadinejad. Did I get it that
Yes.
time?
Ahmadinejad.
Ahmadinejad.
To a guy who was more moderate.
Yeah.
And part of the deal was he was going to improve the economy because he was going to find a way to cooperate with Europe and the United States, and he did. And
He did.
And we basically said, no, we like the other guy better.
Yeah.
And
we much prefer to hate you than to get along with you.
yes,
Well, United States has aligned itself with Saudi Arabia and the rest of that clique, which is essentially creating a club of Sunnis against the Shia. So naturally, there is a Sunni-Shia divide throughout the world against or for. United States depends on which piece you are for.
Isn't the population of Iran about the same size as the population of Sunnis in that area?
probably more.
Well, Iran is mostly Shia.
Yes.
Right. But it's also a fairly populous country.
Yes, it's a fair. I don't know
Right.
the numbers.
I
though.
mean,
The other
you know,
countries
Saudi
are-
Arabia doesn't have many. Iraq, even though we think it's big, only had 20 million or less, and then there's Syria and
Lebanon are not very heavily populated.
But-
Syria's about 8 or was about
Syria's
8.
getting less and less.
Yes,
by
I
the
was about
day.
to say that.
But in Saudi Arabia, you have majority is Sunnis, but then you have minority people who are Shia,
Yeah, right.
and they are not treated the same as the Shia, the Sunnis. They are treated as kind of second-class citizens.
Well, Shia and Sunni hate each other.
Yes, they
no matter
hate.
what.
Yeah, and so we are adding force to that because of our alignment with
Yeah.
Saudi Sheikh. So, what is new?
And are ignoring the assassination and cutting up of that.
That's
Well,
terrible.
Actually, stuff is really happening there. I'm really surprised at how much Saudi Arabia is reacting to pressure.
Well, they have been changing the story over. If you read
Right.
that, it's kind of every day there is some different flavor coming out of it.
But
They're being
yeah.
advised by the Trump administration, change your denial, change your denial,
Okay.
change your denial, change it. Admit something, admit not much, but maybe admit a little bit more, but it never gets to.
The real thing.
Well, actually, I think Trump may be done, or the Saudis may be done with Trump, as the case may be. I was just reading an article today. The Saudis and the Russians started to pump a great deal more oil because they were told that Trump was going to put on these sanctions on Iran, and Iran wasn't going to be able to sell any oil. And then Trump said, well, all your big customers, we'll give you an exemption. So now, although Iran's oil production or sales will be down somewhat, maybe 10%, it's not down close to zero. So now we have an oil glut, which reduced the price of oil in the United States, which made people feel like, well, hey, things are better. I can afford to fill up my tank. And that worked very nicely for the midterm elections, which is what we were supposed to be talking about today. But the Saudis are now saying, hey, I just paid a hell of a lot of money for you to elect a few, not too many, Republicans. So I wonder how the Saudis are going to feel. They're getting all kinds of pressure that is getting close to home about what you have to do to some fairly powerful people in order to satisfy the American press. And then we screwed you with your pocketbook, too.
Well, the exemption U.S. has given to the 8 countries, that's not everlasting. That's going to end, I think, in a few months, because they have been advised to taper their imports to zero by
Okay.
a certain
I
number
thought
of months or so.
the exemption was a lot longer than that.
I don't know how many, but
Yeah,
it's not
I don't know.
everlasting.
Yeah, but basically, the reason why the gas prices are down to the extent that they are, as opposed to up around 350, where they were expected to be, was that Trump flat out lied to the Iraqis.
Okay.
I mean, you can lie to the Russians,
Yes.
which is probably worse for Trump, but the Iraqis.
Or Saudis. Saudis or Iraqis? Or
No,
both?
I'm sorry, the Saudis.
Saudis.
I said
Saudis.
Iraqis, I apologize.
So,
And the Russians, who spent, really pushed their production up, and now they're getting a lot less money.
yeah. Now, through this, one of the things that I am afraid of is that this country's leadership may be headed to writing a new law where a president can serve more than 2 terms. And I am absolutely afraid that one will come to that conclusion.
You can't do that by law. What you have to do is pass a constitutional amendment.
I know.
And states have to ratify it, what 75%?
I don't remember. I know that the Congress has to ratify it as well,
Yes.
and I doubt the House will.
I mean, let's take it back to 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
President, Senate, and House were all
Right.
one party.
But I don't think I
But-
don't think a constitutional amendment can be done by majority vote. I think it does require a larger plurality than just 51%.
You think so?
No,
To
Yeah.
but even if it were 51%, it's also required that 75% of the states.
I thought
Yes.
I thought it was 2/3, but it could be but
A
majority.
large number.
Large number of states
Yeah.
have to say yes
Because
within a certain time
was it
span
No, there is only in the bill,
in the bill.
because there are a lot of amendments sitting out there
Okay.
that have been out there for 50, 60, 70 years that are still potentially, and most of them are things you really don't want to see in the Constitution.
Oh. But I thought there was the last one I remember is the ERA, Equal Rights
Yeah, equal
Amendment.
rights
Rights
amendment.
And I thought that I think the time is running out or has
Ran
run
out.
out.
Right.
Ran
I
out.
think it did, yeah.
So there was a time frame
Yes.
to
Yeah,
that.
Time
But
years,
there
I
were
think.
some that did not have a time frame on it.
Okay.
And the Constitution does not have a time frame in it,
Oh, actually, I didn't realize that.
which is an unfortunate thing, because you can get something that some radical left or right wants and get a couple of states to approve it, and it sits,
There.
and they just don't deal with it in a bunch of other states, and then the world changes and somebody brings it up and they pass it without really understanding what it was they were voting on. It's suddenly, hey, it's part of the Constitution.
I mean, that
Only people 5'8" and above can vote.
can vote. Yeah, that's a good one. That should be in the Constitution. Only 5'8" and below.
Well, actually, I'm down to around 5'7", so I'll buy yours.
I'm gonna shrink another half inch. I've already shrunk an inch.
So, in a positive vein, given the way Congress exists or will exist in January, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that I personally think there will be no change in the judgeships. They will be approving young conservative judges as fast as they can find them. But almost everything else is going to require either that we do nothing, everybody yells and screams, but nothing happens, or that they start finding some way to work together. I noticed there was a thing in the news yesterday or the day before where Trump has come out in favor of some legal reforms that will get rid of, among other things, some mandatory sentencing, or at least reduce
Well,
mandatory
he
sentencing.
wrote something. He wrote something a few days ago about it.
Oh, well,
Tweeted or whatever.
yeah, I don't remember how it came out, but
Well, now that the election is over, that president is headed toward his election, so he has to do some things positive, and that was one way that I saw what he had come out with related to.
well, I wonder if that's actually going to happen, because he did something very similar about a year ago on gun control. He said on TV, you know, you may be afraid of the NRA, but I don't have to be.
Yes.
I think that lasted for a day, 24 hours, 36 maybe.
It doesn't have to be, because they had already contributed a lot of money to his campaign.
Well, but he
Through the-
switched over, and it wasn't the NRA; it was the Russians.
Yes, I know. Russian money filtered through the
Right,
NRA.
the Russians. This lady who came from Russia and represented the NRA from Russia brought with her $4 million or something like that, which
35,
30,
Wow.
how much?
35 million.
35 million, which was contributed to the U.S. NRA, which was then contributed to all of the Republican candidates. So when you say the Russians contributed all this money, yeah, they did.
How do you bring that much money to United States? Is through, not in a suitcase though.
Funds transfer.
Russia,
Oh, funds. Okay,
Russia
okay.
has a Russian NRA branch, and they paid the U.S. branch that money.
Okay. So that's legal transfer money then. Okay. So it's all legal, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it depends on where you're sitting.
Yes, but the
Yes.
outcome
Yes.
doesn't matters. But
Yeah.
so far as the money transfer, it's okay.
If the Russian mob gave me $35 million and I gave it to you,
To give it to
yes,
her. Well, that's
I
a
would
good
be
idea.
money laundering. That's a crime, international crime as well as a U.S. crime.
But if you paid for her dinner, that's not crime.
True.
So you could be paying for her dinner every day, so it would be okay.
$35 million will buy an awful lot of dinners.
That's good. I like that.
Well, I saw the news today. They took a woman and searched her and found money in her panties. So I just wonder why they were searching her. She was coming over. She was coming back or coming over to this country. Why were they searching that part of her body?
They probably had been given a heads up that she was trying to smuggle something.
Well, it was just a.
Or she was a very attractive
That's a-
woman. I mean, your choice.
Which brings up another question that this country will need to deal with, and that is come up with a decision on how do they define sexual abuse. Because right now things are really, really going poorly. Some people think that they are just having an affair and the other person is thinking that they are being sexually abused. How do we define it clearly enough so that people will know that if you did this, that's definitely sexual abuse?
And
We're
by the way,
having more of that come up now.
there's another factor as well. By the way, I think personally that a lot of stuff that's been going on for a very long time has always been, however you want to define it, sexual abuse, and will continue to be. But there's also those areas where somebody thinks they're doing something okay and possibly consensual, and later they're told no, it wasn't, and maybe it was at one time, but it wasn't anymore. A whole bunch of things can change. And I think you're absolutely right, they need to do that. But how? How do you do it? If somebody thinks that they can, one example, and a woman might flirt and possibly have an affair with her boss or her boss's boss or something because she thinks it's a way to get ahead.
Mm.
The guy thinks
Attractive.
he hasn't done anything. You know, he's just been there, and then later finds out, no, you've been using your authority. I didn't know I was doing that. I 1,000% agree. We have to come up with a set of standards and make sure that everybody understands them.
So that means those parameters have to be defined. That's why people are talking about the Me Too movement. How has it gone too far in that sense, that there are no definitions, there are no parameters? And actually there was a case, we just brought that up. There was actually a case in University of California, I forgot which campus. There was a student, and he had gone into a bar, and there was another woman his age. They were all getting together, and this woman was actually enticing him and took him along to her dorm, checked him into her dorm, and then they had sex, and he left. And next day, the university police showed up at his door, that he was put under arrest, and then the judge asked for a video from the bar and from the on-campus dorm. And when he or she, I forgot who the judge was, I just read this story about it some time ago. When the judge looked at all the videos, he says, there is no way you can see the woman is enticing him, woman is leading him on, woman is taking him in, and then they have had sex. And then how do you then come out and define, while it was actually happening in the bar also, you could see that this is what the judge wrote. You could see that things were happening even in the bar, led by the woman.
But again, the question is, at the moment of...
no means no.
Yes,
Did
right.
you say
but
no
I
at
don't
that
know.
time?
I mean, I don't. That's what the judge decided. No,
No.
judge decided in favor of the guy.
And what, I'll give you another question. Again, no means no, and I understand it. But what happens when you have a contract between two people? I'll do this if you do that. And the person does what they're supposed to do, and then the other person says no. No means no. Will not, shall not. You are a criminal just for asking. And it's not just male and female. It could be female and female and male and male. A whole bunch of combinations.
The whole grouping.
Yes.
The problem is not simple. And there are a group of people who just treat their fellow man or woman or child or whatever horribly. But the people who are trying to play by the rules don't know what the rules are.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that it's to protect the people who need to know what the rules are, that we need to do something. And I totally agree with you. And the only reason I bring up some of these other examples, which my wife will be screaming at me about in about a half an hour, is because it's got to be made clear it's not a simple question.
But who is going to define those parameters? That's the other piece to that.
It's got to be done by the political leadership, because it will be legal. It will be a law. And there will be punishments for those who violate those laws.
The problem is, even if you do have an ironclad agreement, okay, as in a contract between a contractor and a contractor's
Contractee.
Contractee. Yeah.
contractee, you know, a union, say, that builds a building, and then
And then the contractor says, no, I don't think I'll pay you?
yes, and then if he loses, he declares bankruptcy
Mm-hmm.
because he did it under an LLC,
Okay.
and the people who did the work are out. They don't get paid. So even that is nebulous. And as a matter of fact, there's a guy that I've heard of who's done it 6 times.
Yes, that's the thing right now. You see that. How do you resolve that? I don't know.
Well, one of the ways you resolve it is you actually get a special prosecutor and find things that are criminal. You can do things civilly that you can have, then you can declare bankruptcy. And civil court is a heck of a lot different than criminal court.
But it has been all legal, though. That's the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you another one, and that is
And
corporations are people according to the Supreme Court, which means that the head of the corporation has to be liable for the crimes of that corporation.
No,
As
I
interpreted by you.
disagree. The
Why?
corporation has to go to prison.
Okay.
That means a piece of paper.
No. The,
Oh.
the corporation. The corporation. Who's the corporation?
Piece of paper.
The,
Well,
the
the board of
corporation.
directors.
The board of directors and the stockholders.
Well,
Right? They own the
And the
corporation.
They
stock-
own the
Oh.
The
corporation.
stockholders by
So
definition.
do we have a prison large enough for all that?
No, actually, I was thinking of the physical building has to go to prison.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
okay.
that's what I was wondering. I mean, this is
Look,
what,
3
look
years
at all
of business.
the work that would be generated to pick that building up, take it apart, pick it up, put it
No,
in the
y-
prison, and put it back together again. People would be
actually-
employed forever.
Actually, you just put a sign on it, out of business.
Well, there's got to be, the problem with out of business is that the people who benefited aren't in prison. Enron, perfect example. Enron screwed the people of California billions and billions of dollars. And
You're
if the-
talking about a very sore subject.
And if the idiot who ran Enron had not gotten so greedy as to steal from the stockholders, it would have been perfectly legal. The only reason he went to jail was he got
didn't.
caught with his hand in the cookie jar.
He didn't. He died.
Well,
No, but
he
there was
would have
one-
gone to jail. And the CFO, I think,
I
went
think
to jail.
two people.
There were two people
people who went.
indicted, the CFO and the president, I think.
Yeah, but the
Somebody went to jail, actually.
stockholders couldn't sue them.
No.
I think the CFO went to jail.
Maybe they did, but the stockholders couldn't sue them.
But other than that, it was perfectly legal because the corporation is a superhuman, and the group that's supposed to set policy and ensure that everything is done appropriately is not liable for anything. So you can be on the board of directors of anything, and you're not liable. You could be sued by the stockholders, but you're pretty much able to protect yourself from that.
But doesn't that mean that taking the devil's advocate here, that if you advocate that the corporations are people and the board of directors is liable, that means there will be a huge incentive for not sitting on board of directors,
Yes.
and that's a lot of well-paid folk.
Yes, it is. I know that from family connections.
Okay.
But at the other hand, it will also mean that the board of directors doesn't just sit there and collect money. They now start looking at the books. They start making sure that they're involved in policy decisions. And when things go a way they don't feel is appropriate, they resign super fast, publicly.
Which doesn't. I mean, right now, most of the, as you said, it's a
It's
good,
a
good,
well-paid
well-paid
thing. Some
job.
people take it seriously, and a lot don't.
Most of the time, just well-paying job.
I don't think if you're not in the company and you're just simply on the board of directors, the amount of money is not that much.
Yeah. It's more than I'm
can-
making.
I mean, that's good amount of money
And
for.
your expenses are taken care of, et cetera.
Right, but it's not like an officer. Now, clearly, the officers might be on the board of directors, the CFO and the CEO, COO.
Well, those are the people who are running the company day to day.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they
Yeah.
also can be on the board of
Yes,
directors. Usually,
they
what
usually
it
are.
is the board of directors come from other
Yeah.
CEOs
Yes.
of other companies, and they're the ones that the CEOs of other companies are the ones that decide how much the CEO of this company is
Should be
gonna,
paid.
and then that CEO is going to be on our board of
Yes.
directors and judging how much. That's why the
Mm.
CEOs are making so much money,
Well,
because they all vote for how much money